Thank you, Claudia. Claudia and I have, was it 2014? Yes, going on 10 years. And I have to say, Claudia has kind of been the protagonist in my last 10 years of this journey as an architect, and introduced me to a lot of people and work, and made Tucson welcome to me. So it's been really cool. And then working on the projects with her, it's been a true collaboration. So a lot of our consultants we hire, and they're consultants, but then working with Claudia, you don't just get lighting or interiors, you also get an observant eye, and she's looking at the work, and occasionally an eyebrow will raise and say, oh, I don't know. And so it's been great working with her. She's a good presence on the project, and you'll see in the work as we go through it. The lighting and interiors really elevates the work. And yeah. Oh, really? Okay. How's that? Better? So built form. See, that sounds really loud to me. It's not too loud? Built form was a term that I first heard at MIT 30 years ago, 35 years ago. And I really took it to heart, and it really has to do with taking an assembler's attitude towards architecture and building, and understanding materials and systems, allowing them to contribute to the aesthetic, and using that to build a building in a way that's a reasonable process that starts with the ground and works its way up through to meet the sky. And it's not sort of this creation, but it's more of a found place that completely responds to the context. And so we really don't try to create anything, and I look for all the answers to steal from the site and from the client and from the builders, and everyone on the team will give you the answers if you let the process work. And obviously you can't do this if you don't observe what's there. Observation, association, and transformation. Understanding what's there and how to transform it is really the key, I think, to the work. And so the observation has to be keen, and then you want to make friends with it and understand it, and then you will protect it. And so not only are you thinking about how to build on it, but it's finding out what's there that's special that you want to protect and save. And then obviously the transformation comes. So this is not a kind of a polished lecture that you might have heard before. It's just going to be my description of the work and what we did, and you can kind of gather the haptic connection as we go through it. But as Oscar said, when I got the invitation from him to come down, and I think Claudia was involved in that too, but it was immediately I wanted to go back, and I did. I think I gathered up six or seven books, a couple of Johannes, and reread and really tried to lock down kind of the definition of it. And what I found was really it's the essence of what we should be doing as architects. It is everything. It's the only thing that you should be doing. And well, enough said. I will get into the work and it'll come out. The first project, and so these are arranged kind of in chronological order, but not exactly, because I wanted to start with something smaller. But this is one of the first projects I worked on with Claudia, and it's called the TAC Barn because that's what it is, and it's in Sonoma, in Glen Ellen, which is the less glitzy side of Napa. So it's on the other side. It's by the Sonoma Mountains, and then the Vaca Mountain range is on the other side. That's where Napa is proper. So this is a project that was pre-existing. So here, and I really enjoy, I think 3 of the projects today are remodels, but I really enjoy solving the problem. And this is the project as it came to us. There was a little barn at the top of the page there, a pool, and then a house and a garage. And the clients were repeat clients. This is the second project for them. And what we started with was working on this little barn at the top of the page. And it was really to give the clients something quick to be able to experience the site and think about what they wanted to do on the main house. And so it was already a TAC barn this is about an 8-acre property that the family had horses and they grew grapes and they had a big garden, and I'm not sure what other animals, but this was a working barn, and they had folks staying there to tend the farm and watch the animals. And this is the end result. And actually, it's kind of two projects. There was a small TAC barn, and then at the bottom of the driveway there, that longer building, that's the main house. And then we rebuilt the pool because it was on bad soil. But haptically speaking, this was a very sensory overload space. This is a TAC barn, and then if you can imagine the smell in here was interesting. Gravel floor, an old wood stove, and the old wood. And when the client saw it, the first thing she said was, "I love the smell of this, and I like the feel of it." And she had a family history of visiting a farm. And she was a child, and they live in the city, and so it absolutely made her come to life to be here. And so we took this little building, and it's actually, so that's it on the left, obviously, and it's still inside this one on the right. And we basically draped a rain screen over it and a new roof on top, and took away the attic sleeping area because this actually is now an ADU, and they're limited to 840 square feet in Sonoma. And so in order to do that, we actually pushed the wall in and made a separate entrance to an outside entrance to the old horse corral, which became a screen porch. And so the old plan is on the left and the new one's on the right. And so by doing that, we solved the problem of the client by having a place for them, and they had 2 children that were teenagers to sleep and stay for the weekends, but still meet the ADU requirement. Let's see. So the screen porch, super important, right? So it connects the space. There's no air conditioning, obviously, and there's very little heat. It's a radiant heated slab, but the screen porch ventilates the space. The interior, all the studs and the rafters were maintained. And here's the details showing the new roof added on top and the rain screen outside. And there were no new trees harmed in the making of this building. So everything was salvaged from the old floor and so forth and ripped into new studs and so forth. And so everything here is older. It already had sliding shutter doors, but here's the details showing how we did that with steel divided light sash glazing to kind of break the reflectivity of the glass. And that window shouldn't be there. So one of the things about the talk today is this is not going to be sort of here's this perfect project, but I'll give you the truth about what happens as you go through the negotiation of doing a project with everyone on the team, including the client. And many times it's a good thing. The clients bring something good to the project, but sometimes they bring something that's counter to the concept. And my idea for this was a barn is dark. And so it should be completely dark, except when you open the shutters, and then you get that feeling of opening the barn door, right? But as humans are, they have to have light. So we added that, and they asked for a clear story as well. But I love this image because of the way the darkness is evident in that walkway down to the screen porch. Here you can see the rain screen hanging over the foundation. So the siding is reclaimed redwood. Here's the horse lean-to protection that turned into that. Those are the same rafters. The boards are spaced as they go through the screen porch. The builder actually recommended this. This is perforated aluminum in between the boards to keep the insects out. So that was a pretty fun project. The downside was the client got so happy that she said, let's make the main house a barn, which was for the first 2 weeks a travesty for me, but I gradually started to think about it. And I thought in terms of, well, there's a lot of amazing details about a barn that could be used to make a new place. And they'll think it's a barn, but what I really see it as is a group of details, and which plays into what Oscar wanted to talk about today is the details and assemblies that make a building. And so same site plan. So the project had an existing gravel driveway that was steep, and we really wanted to keep that crunch of the gravel for the cars and for the folks walking in. And the building kind of is angled the wrong direction. You notice it's not, north is up, so the long direction of the building is facing the west sun, not good. So the short angle of the roof there was designed to take solar panels and to reduce the amount of gain on the roof. But in the end, we used a pedestal mounted array of solar panels. But the other thing about today is I think that what I discovered and I did spend too much time, where's Oscar? I think my wife was about to kill me if I didn't have the dining room table covered with images for one more day. But it seemed to me that I realized that the assemblies and the details can be at a range of sizes. And so it can be building sized as well as the size of a small detail. So here you can see the building relating to the site. And to minimize grading, there's a cantilever at one end and a bridge at the other. And to make the trip short and the climb short to the little TAC barn, we made the access from the upper level of the main space of the barn. Floor plans. The fireplace was foreign to a barn topology, so it's separate, and there's a little glazed connection for the fireplace. The great thing about barns is they have shutters and they have natural ventilation. And so the prevailing breezes are from the southeast in the summer when you need cooling. And so we did a shutter, I don't know where it is, there it is. And it only is a wood shutter with insect screen. And so, and the building is not air conditioned except for the sleeping areas because it just gets too hot to sleep. So when you open that shutter, it aligns with the door upstairs that leads to the TAC barn, and it'll literally blow paper through the building when it's open. The cantilever, speaking of negotiations, so that's the original cantilever from the concrete wall. And then value engineering entered the project, and we added little columns further out that saved about $100,000, if you can believe it, in steel costs. There's the shutter detail. It was originally designed to go to the floor, but we raised that because the railing became problematic. This is the detail. In some ways, I thought of it as a barn that I was inhabiting. And so this glazing faces the cooler side of the site. And this is the detail for that. Provide a thin overhang on one side. There's the doors aligning and a bridge up to the TAC barn. So on the warm side, the glazing is treated like the shape of a shutter, so it's very vertical and thin, and then the entry is deeply recessed. I like doing that one quick. The doors in the kitchen there open completely in pocket to the right. There's a little guest TAC barn up high on the hill there, if you look behind the building. So in the end, it was okay. It seemed to me that it turned out to be a reductive building and everything is subtractive. And so worked out, and the clients are super happy. I think they spend quite a bit of time here. Creek House, this was actually chronologically probably the first house. And I don't talk about clients too much, but this is this client was interesting because he's a scientist, Dr. David Ho, and he was the AIDS researcher that solved the AIDS crisis with the cocktail, where they had 3 drugs. I don't know if you guys remember that, you're all too young, but pretty important person. And he came to me and asked, and he found this property with the boulders. And if you can almost smell this when you look at the image. but the crunch of the pine needles and the manzanita and the bitter brush, and the basalt boulders and the pine trees, the scent in the air. This is really a pretty special site. And when we walked it, it was so refreshing to hear. His only comment was, "Can we not harm the boulders?" Which I thought was, wow, since when do you hear that? And so here's the site. It's at the base of Lookout Mountain. Lake Tahoe is on the other side of that mountain. And that dark green pattern running through the site is Martyrs Creek. And so the building site is located on that, and you can see the building form took on the direction of the creek and the prevailing breezes which follow the creek. As far as process goes, I start the projects by the initial negotiation is with myself, because when you first start a project, there's a point in the beginning where you're all alone. Really, it's just you and the client, and you haven't involved the staff yet, and really no one's there to argue with except yourself. And so you start asking questions and thinking about materials and details and consultants and who it might be that works on it. I still draw a lot on every project, and I like these sort of sketches that are a moment in time where you actually kind of think you have it figured out. There's a long way to go after this, but you know where the sun is, you know where the wind is, where the contours are. So lots of sketches, lots of sections. This house was the first house coming out of the big recession, and our firm had gone down to 3 people. And so you can tell I had a lot of time on my hands because I got to do this drawing. Here it is on the site. There's the creek. And we kind of followed the contours, but we also found a flattish spot at the top of the site here, and then angled the building a little bit east of due south, and it allowed the end of the building to cantilever out over those contours and the boulders. The floor plans look kind of complicated, but this is set up on what I refer to as, when I first heard this back in school from John Brocken, zones and margins, use zones and margins. And so they have different dimensions. And so if you look at this, there's an alternation in that middle plan. There's a tandem garage, that's a use zone, and then there's a margin for entry, mudroom, bathrooms, and so forth, and then another use zone for the main part of the house. And the client asked for just 2 bedrooms and then a kind of, he called it a tatami room, but really a multi-sleeping room downstairs. And it was a family tradition in their world to do that. And so when the kids and the grandkids show up, everybody gets a futon and sleeps on the tatami mats. Here's the building cantilevering over the boulders. And if you look to the far right there, you'll see, so some of the requests came from the client's childhood in Taiwan, and he grew up with rock gardens, and he asked for one in this house. And so what you see here is, in addition to the energy diagram and the ventilation flowing through the house, we set the ground form of concrete and then displaced the framework of the house westward to earn that courtyard to the right behind a wall that protects it from a neighboring house. And then it also cantilevered the form out over boulders, which allowed for a second rock garden. So that's the entry on the right in that small margin zone. And then going down the stairs, there's that boulder and a glass floor. And this concrete wall, we've done this quite a bit, but there are actually 2 8-inch walls with insulation. So you get the concrete inside as well. So you get half the wall serving as mass. And this wall was a long kind of registration line in the landscape that kind of drove this house. It's morning sun. There's the boulder. So these are really very simple details, but the shop drawing was obviously much more intense for this floor, about 5 panes of glass. This one only shows 4. But doing a glass floor is one thing. Doing one outside where it's 10 degrees sometimes is another. And so we were worried about condensation. So you see the little stipples on there, that's kind of an impregnated friction, so you won't slip. There's a view down, looking down the wall. The primary bedroom is at the end of that access, and then above it is the study. And there's two doors that close that off for privacy, but also can control the ventilation. So if that lower door is open and the primary bedroom door is open, you can open these and decide how much air you want. Here's the east rock garden, and that wall protects the client from the neighbor. And that another reason that the glazing is, this is kind of looking from the foot of the bed. The water and the snowmelt falls from the roof through a grate and into this basin. So the client had originally asked for kind of a permanent water feature, and I just said that doesn't work in this environment. So this is an ephemeral one that only happens when it rains or snows. But he does have a filler if he wants to have a party in the summer and it hasn't rained in 6 months, so we can do that. But all the stone is local. The aggregate is crushed granite. And we left almost all the boulders. So the elongated east-west axis obviously gives you the smaller exposure on those two faces, so we don't overheat. This is the neighboring side, so it's very closed to the north. The garage has obscure glazing. And one of the cool things is no landscaping was brought onto the site. So this is all existing and transplanted plants from the footprint of the project. And so when you see it here, it obviously feels untouched, and the house is just sitting in that. Next project is Minor Road. This is in Orinda, and that little guy is Rowan, helping me measure. We climbed up on the roof one day and sat in the shade of this big oak tree. And this again is for two scientists who teach at Berkeley in sustainable. One teaches sustainable cities, and one is in fuels. And Tim was the first, had the first hydrogen fuel cell station installed in Berkeley. And so they asked us to, they moved from Oakland, where it's colder, to sunny Orinda on the other side of the mountain, and asked me to remodel this house. And we agreed to it. Here's the neighborhood. So they had, this is a 4-acre parcel in the middle of a smaller subdivision, but they were really cool in that this was an existing house as well. And we started with this remodel notion, so it never changed, and we never tried to go up on the hill to get a better view. We used the existing road and existing utilities and existing grading. And what that did for us was allowed us to keep the house close to this giant oak that had been there for 70 years, I think. It was built in 54. And you'll see in a second. Sketch floor plan. There's the oak. We originally designed operable screens for this face because it's west, but in the end, it was decided the trees would do the job and they would add them later if need be. So one of the great things about this existing house was that you entered alongside the house instead of kind of attacking it. And so you got to associate with it and come around. And so we followed that same pattern. Everything that was possible was donated to Habitat. We used, this was a lower budget project, and we used Shotcrete or fluid applied concrete. And the super amazing thing about this, we're doing it again right now on a large house in Woodside, but you avoid the formwork hassle. This is, you can see the formwork there, very lightweight, right? So it's not load bearing, it's hanging off the rebar. So in the end, there was nothing left to save, and the soil was bad, and the house ended up being taken down except for the fireplace. And we wrapped that in concrete and used it as a seismic restraint so we could avoid moment frames. but the Shotcrete made the concrete much more affordable. And then we reused all this formwork in the construction of the building. And so from as far as a sense of place, I thought it was nice that we used the same firebox. We got to keep a wood burning box, which is illegal now, but and this set the finished floor for the new house. And so all the same carbon is there from the old fires, and they have fires in the same old box. This is glazing day. There's the tree. So the tree is literally, I don't know. So in California, you have to be, there's a setback from the drip line. So you are really far from a tree, an oak tree, a heritage tree like this. And here we're about 6 feet from it because it grew up next to the house and put its roots out away from the house. During framing, it has it's net zero, has a 4.5 kilowatt PV system on it. Here's that same driveway, kind of allowing you to associate, become friends with the house before you arrive. And then as you turn the corner, the house closes to the west sun and privatizes the space from the car and the entry sequence. And there's the super cool tree, very close to the house. And we used a lot of perforated screen. This was before the pandemic, but these folks did a lot of phone calls overseas and different things. And so they were constantly pacing with a phone. And so there was a long walk to this spot where they would do a lot of meetings. Some detailing on the perforated screens. The water is captured from the roof and it falls at the end of this hallway into a drain and into storage tanks, and that's used to wash clothes and flush toilets. And they have a little valve in the laundry room, and they love playing with that. So the main space, we used oak in reference to the big oak, and it's acoustically treated and spaced with rock wool, and the insulation value of the total assembly is about R80. And in this pattern, I think one of the things you can see that we do in our practice is we utilize slack. And so if we're setting up, whether it be space or material or pattern, here we added that thin slack piece, and it makes it so you don't have to cut or trim the pieces. But you also earn the track space for lighting, and I think we had adjustable lights, and then there's also later in the project before it was after it was finished, we had suspended pendants that aren't there yet. Client plays piano, and so it was important to him for the acoustics to be good. And so here's what you get. So the big thing here is that decision that day to stay with the footprint. And even though we weren't really remodeling it and keep the fireplace, it ended up giving us one of the most iconic things about the project, and that's the closeness to this tree. And so when you're in the house, there's that image, I'll go back to it. It's really, you know, you're watching the ants crawl in the tree and you see the moss. I think one of the cool things here is what you don't see. So those doors pocket into that wall to the left. The mechanical system, there's a register above the doors in the jamb that's washing the glass with air. But you don't see that obviously. And then the frame itself for the door is a 1-inch plate, and it's suspended with a rod that goes up through that frame at the center point. So we worked hard to make sure the lines are light and thin. Speaking of screens, we think of screens, and this will be on the rest of the projects as well as we go through, and you'll see this approach, but repeating the behavior of the forest and understanding that it's actually a big screen of multiple dimensions is important to us. And so we build that into the architecture as well. This is a stair that's open, and it was built with apple ply. Mezzanine office. And there's how close you are to the tree. It's really pretty lovely when you're sitting on the sofa. Steel comes in with you, forms the backsplash for the range, the hood. And in our office, the design doesn't stop until the end. So marking up shop drawings, details, continues all the way to the end. Here's the tone of the project now, the color and the landscape. So one of the interesting things about this in terms of the journey an architect takes is by the time we were finished, and these were really nice clients, you know, people get frustrated with the time and the budgets, and they were ready to move in. And getting it photographed was a challenge, right? So we actually had to put the clients in a hotel, stage the house, help them with moving expenses. And there was no landscaping. And I noticed it was autumn. I noticed the bags of leaves around the neighbors' houses. And so I brought some leaves over and I got the contractor to bring over some leaves, and that was our landscape. But went through a lot to keep this project in the saddle and get it shot correctly. Am I going too fast? Sorry. Look out. There's a few projects in Tahoe. This is in Truckee, and this is that's actually North Star Lookout Mountain, and that's the Martis Valley. So this is kind of right at the base of the mountain. And this photograph looks great as a site until you realize the site's actually over there on the right, in the trees and the rocks. But that's a ski run on the left, and that in the end turned out to be the initial driving force of how to connect to the place. So I saw the ski run as a way to organize the forum, because I tried terracing it and it was just too steep. Parts of the site were 25 to 30% slope. So it seemed to me that maybe we just make a ski run out of the house. And so this space, the social space, public space, is on the ski run side, and you can literally ski into it from the mountain. And the retaining walls that go up the slope part, they don't meet, and it allows the grade to fall into the court there, and you can actually ski down that. And we've got photos of some of the staff skiing down through it. So there's that opening in the landscape for the ski run on the right, and there's the opening in the house, and it's one big space, kind of like the space was always there. There's the walls parted and the snow and the land kind of pouring in to the back, and it catches your eye and connects you to the ski runs on the hill, which is interesting. Claudia, you can see, obviously, I mean, everything about this is so consistent with the work. The drapes, the curtains are, you know, they're abstracted from the ceiling. The lighting, the ceiling is super clean, and there's just some very mini track lights mounted in the spaces between the boards. This is actually light snow. Right now, that snow is probably up to the top of that concrete wall. House was on a cul-de-sac, and really wanted to protect them from the noise that comes from a cul-de-sac and all the projects that are there. And so we did this sort of hidden indirect entry, and then we came up, the client asked for some color. She really needs color, and claimed that the house was a little bit black and white. And so this was our gesture to her, and it turned out to be much more than just that, because the way Claudia lit it, the light comes through, and so the whole entry is bathed in this red light, which rings and references the volcano of Lookout Mountain from a couple million years ago. And the rock there is, you can tell you're around a volcano because the basaltic rocks look like they were laid there yesterday. This is the laundry room, mudroom. Everything is concealed. The washer and dryer there is there to the right, but it's buried below grade, and so that's a skylight at the end. And we worked very hard to bring light into this form, even though half of the house is buried. One of the things I was going to mention is that we used Henry Built on this project for the casework, and wow, that was really a fun process. The restraint that you have to show in using their system, because there's modules, is important, and it kind of gears everyone up, if you know what I mean, as far as paying attention to. We're not just doing anything here with the casework. We have to follow the modules that we have to build with. And then they come with beautiful details. So in working with getting as much light as possible into the building, here I'm showing the main wall, the fireplace wall. As it starts to leave the building and relate to the site, it starts to fold and separate and creates a repetition of behavior of the tree trunks. But this was actually done to hide a spa that's tucked in behind there. And those are 4-inch slots, which keeps people from getting into the spa for code reasons. The angles. Living room. There's a kind of a subtle cantilever in the fireplace that kind of activates this so it doesn't settle too much. The roll on the roof there is was required to stiffen the roof edge. Otherwise, there was going to be some kind of element there. We keep the roof structure inside the form so the glazing can go up to a thin roof line, and it just creates less friction with the landscape and allows the house to slide into it. This is kind of a sacred place in the house. It's a sun niche, kind of for a single person, with an oversized piece of glazing facing the morning sun. Kitchen, and we do this quite often, we sanitize them by pulling all the appliances out that we can and hiding those in a pantry behind. So the refrigerator, all the ovens, things like that. It's a very narrow space, but it gets the work done. And it's not totally a back of house space, it's the same materiality. That's a window into the access on the hallway side. So it's got some life, and that's also an elevator. The place where the elevator arrives from below for groceries. The concrete walls come up to protect the house from the neighboring houses, and you just see the landscape beyond. And that wall has actually got hydronic tubing in it that warms that space a little bit, warms you anyway. Another way of connecting, this roof slope follows the slope of the land and then conceals most of the building below grade. So here again, the concrete ground form comes up and makes demarcations, forms the building, connects to the roof line, connects to the sky. And then the second story was sheathed in black steel to make it recede and go away. So I forgot to mention, this is important. All of these photos are shot by the same photographer, Joe Fletcher. And I know Claudia and Rick also use Joe. Interesting story though, my neighbor was the nephew of Charles Moore, and he introduced me to Joe. And he said, this was 15 years ago, if you use Joe on all your projects, he'll give you a discount. Well, I've used him on all my projects, but I didn't get a discount. But what I did get is this amazing continuity in the work and the way it's photographed, because Joe is trained as a painter. And I think every photograph is that for him. And he really photographs light. And I kid him all the time that my work is a vehicle for his work. Forest, we have a couple left here. So these are a couple of Los Angeles clients, and the client had an issue with glare, and she was, the very first thing she asked for is, can we design a house such that I don't have to have the shades drawn all the time. And this house is located in the same neighborhood. 2 acres, over 100 trees, and I think we took out 3. So a small rectangle at the back of the lot facing the sun and the view. (4,500 square feet). So here, the collage of the forest and the screen and the dark light reversals are repeated in the form. So between the concrete and the black steel rain screen, here's that. So the screen was abstracted from the bark of the trees. So it's steel angles and protects the wooden portions of the house from flying embers and so forth. And so this is another non-combustible house. But the cool thing about this photograph is we used glazing to cast a glow of light that repeats the behavior of the light on the trees. You can see the light on the pine trees there. It's almost the same. And then this house has a passing connection as well for the entrance. So you don't see the door, and the steps are pulled apart to slow your pace. So you really associate with the landscape prior to entering. And you have to do some 90-degree turns and figure out where you're going. So it turns it into an extended entry sequence. We used reclaimed teak here so that we could use the exact same material inside and out. But you can see the big overhang, almost for glare. The screens at the edges start to allow the building to share territory with the landscape. Here's some of those sun shading devices for Julie, and then the rain screen details. Camp out. Same neighborhood. This was he's an industrial designer, and he was he led industrial design for Oracle, I believe. But at any rate, he's the CEO of 5.9 now, and a lot of times now I look for clients as opposed to projects. And so interesting clients that are going to do a good project are more valuable to us than fantastic sites or big budgets or any of that. And so I think because of this client's history, I was really taken by it. But speaking of the journey and so forth, here's some sketches. And later you'll see in a second, but the kind of rust colored cross-hatching is all perforated mesh, which was deleted, and you'll see in the project. But this house is surrounded by neighbors, and they really wanted some outdoor space with privacy. And so the courtyard came into being here. And so dug in completely at the back of the house and the courtyard, and then a pavilion on the downhill side. Again, fire came close to this house. This is a smoky day in the fall. You see the mountains, there's actually a smoke in the air, and the ground is very dry. That's mule's ear leaves that are super crispy and dry. So no wood outside, all concrete and steel. And you can see here, originally the mesh would have been over the glazing, and it would have been a little bit less reflective. And in the courtyard, that really means a lot. Energy diagram. The roof turns up at the end there and makes a gutter and protects the snow, the kids from the snow falling off the roof. But it also collects the water and puts it into rain stores and puts it back into the groundwater table. It's the courtyard. So, right, yeah, it would have been a little less glassy if the mesh would have been there, and also would have made snow removal easier. But still working on getting it added. Some details for that. So the house does have a real sort of the spirit of a campsite where the kids can go to bed at night and see people still up sitting around the fire. It's a fun thing. The materials are all singular in nature. It's all sugar pine, basalt floors, and it's consistent throughout. Interior designer on this one did some fun things, and the table being a picnic table, I thought was pretty fun. Once again, we removed all the noisemakers and visual clutter from the kitchen and put it in a pantry behind, and open shelves in the pantry. Concrete, by the way, we used fiberglass tie rods so it wouldn't have that sort of industrial snap tie pattern. Here's some of those roof details. And the mesh. So there's the pantry behind the kitchen where the bar is located and the mixer and so forth. It's a fun project. Nice clients. So this is the last project. Well, it went too fast. Am I done too soon? 6:30. So this is Las Vegas on a developer lot, and there was literally no near context. It had been removed and padded, graded the site. But it had these distant context views that could be attached to. And so here's the east side. Here's the west side. So that's Red Rock Canyon over to the right. And there's more houses here now, but pretty pristine view to the mountains in the back. But what we did was, and the interesting thing here is the pools are given there. It's just so hot. It's like here, obviously. Oh, is my battery plugged in? I'll try and finish. So the wind comes from the west, obviously, and very harsh, and everyone has their pools in the back, and they get filled with sand and get blown into the house. And Las Vegas has this funny rule about no swimming pools in the front yard. And so this swimming pool is in the front yard, but we somehow got by that by making them think it was a water feature. This has a 45 kilowatt photovoltaic system. Lower floor is completely buried, and then we worked really hard to get light and air into it. So there's a kid's family room in the middle there, theater at the bottom, workout, fitness, 2 kind of outdoor terraces, and then an adult family room we called Club Nico. This was for Andrew and Adelia. And it has a opening at the end where you see the fire and the glow there that opens to the sky. And there's windows in the pool to allow connection to the place. Main floor is a pavilion, so all the glass disappears into pockets. And the drapes, I don't think the drapes do. The garage is side entrance. Hugo Sanchez did the landscape and really did a great job in making it feel like it's actually in the desert. But he did use 4 oak trees, which do grow in Las Vegas in the wet areas in the valleys, to shield that glass from the west sun. This section is pretty fun. You can see the fire pit area to the far left and the pool. And then the upper floor cantilevers out over the garage to shield the cars from the sun. Very strict, minimal use of materials, Corten, concrete, and oak. So the entrance is through this portal kind of in the middle here, and you go through a gate, but you're still outside and it's dark, and it ramps up slowly to internal courtyard at the front door. But just prior to entering, you get a glimpse of this elevated pool. And the pool was elevated for functional reasons, but then it turned out to be useful for a lot of other things. But by elevating it, normally pools have fences around them, right? That concrete wall is exactly the height of the fence that's required around a pool, so it's protected from this side. And then elevating it on the interior protected the children. The upper story is 6 bedrooms, all the bedrooms, and it's protected by perforated screens that slide open and closed. We did kind of this full pool detail, which is really hard to do. So the screens, we pulled the rooms back from the screens and created decks and or just small zones of space to get the glass back away from the heat of the mesh. Here's some of that detailing, and this is a fun detail because there's so much going on here. So there's a mechanical duct to the left there. There's a little, so Claudia did this, there's no lighting in the ceilings. And this is a LED strip in that very corner right there. And then the curtain tracks and the glazing, and then the steel, and then a very thin roof edge, and then the mesh. You guys are quiet. So I think these are, is Claudia still here? She might have. What are those? Pebbles? And you sit on them? They're like a cool beanbag? Very fun. Here's that detail through the pool edge. That's actually one bird. He was up there and now he's down there getting a drink. So there's a steel sheathed mast that comes into the house and it separates the living space from the primary bedroom and has a flush steel door that is hidden. So the entrance is concealed. There's the primary bedroom. So materiality is consistent throughout. Elevated bathing. So the view was not straight out really. The view to Red Rock was kind of at an angle. So we used that quite a bit. Acoustically treated ceilings and walls again. Structural glazing, steel doors. It's one of the windows in the pool. A fire. I guess Andrew's pretty excited about this fire, Claudia. It is the twilight hour, and you can see the stair risers are open to allow light and air to that lower level. There you go. Thank you.